And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up listening to Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. This is the last book in the Green Bone Saga trilogy, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just right now. So this is a 5 out of 5, another one. This is a perfect trilogy. 15 out of 15 total score for me, and I just can't say enough positive things about everything that I just read or listened to, whatever you want to call audiobooks. This is just awesome. This is going to go down as very easily a top 10 all-time fantasy series for me. I'm not sure if it'll break into the top 5 or not, but it's absolutely going to be in the top 10. And it's not like slot 10 either. It's like probably somewhere in the middle there. It's just so obviously an S-tier series for me. And I really can't say enough positive things about it. You know, I'm very sad that this is over and I don't get to experience this world and these characters anymore. And it doesn't have to be. You know, this series ended, and I keep this spoiler free. And if you want to talk spoilers, come join me in the Discord. The link's down below. I'd love to chat with you about it. I'm always chatting about the books that we read and oftentimes talking about spoilers for the books that I'm currently going over. But, you know, the series didn't end in a place where it has to be done. You know, this series could keep going. They can talk about the next generation of characters, conflicts that they go into. And I haven't done a ton of research into it, but I think that Fonda Lee is done with these characters and with the Green Bone Saga world. And that's a shame for me. I often have been a proponent, and I feel that this is kind of hypocritical for me to say this, that books need to know when they should end. You know, I say this about TV shows too, that, you know, they need a definitive ending point, because if they just go on and on, you could ruin a really good thing. But I feel opposite here. We could see another trilogy in this, and I wouldn't feel like it was just fan service. So yeah, that's one of my only criticisms for this. I also will criticize, and this is another hypocritical thing that I'm going to say. I feel like a big hypocrite today, but, you know, I'm just going to be honest with you. You know, the ending wasn't perfect, and I've been a big proponent that saying endings can define a series, but that's not the case here. Now, I don't think the ending was bad. In fact, I thought it was very good, but it wasn't perfect. And in my head, I had this perfect ending, or many different ones, and this didn't hit the chords for me. It just kind of ended. And the conflict felt a little bit rushed at the end, but the series isn't about that. It was about the journey, and the journey was wonderful, and the ending was good. It was not, again, it wasn't horrible. When I look back on this book and I compare it to the other ones, I think very clearly Jade City, the first in this trilogy, was probably the worst in the trilogy, and Jade War and this one are probably tied for the next best slot. I really couldn't say which of these two books was better. I liked some things about Jade War more, and I liked some things about Jade Legacy more, and I'll get into those right now. So let's go into the different parts about this book that I like to review when determining what makes this book really good. Let's try to pick it apart. And so let's start with the story, and the story is going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. You know, I can't say a lot about this story because I don't want to spoil anything, but what I can say is that this book wrapped up the war between the No Peak clan, which is what our protagonists are a part of, and the Mountain clan, which is the enemy clan. The first book ramped up that war. It began the war. The second book was the heat of the war, and Jade War, it's in the name. And this one was the conclusion of that war. And I really liked that this book gave us some resolution, not always good resolution, to all of the character arcs. And what I mean by good resolution is that not every character got this fluffy, perfect ending. There was some dark grittiness to the story that continued on with the ending conclusion to all of these characters. And I don't want to get any more specific than that, but I really did appreciate that. I would have been disappointed if you had this book that was about some shocks and some awes and wanted you to really portray that what you would imagine a real mafia family would go through. It's not all, you know, perfect and peachy and nice and fluffy. There is darkness to it, and I liked that there was some darkness to the character conclusions here. I thought that the time skips that were a major feature of this story. You know, this book covered 3 decades of length. That's crazy, and I don't think I've ever read a book that attempted to do what this book just did. The first couple books took place in a very short time frame. This one had enormous time jumps, and it was really done to perfection, and it made me just kind of sit back in awe And I think ultimately that's my favorite part of this book, is that we got to see this character growth from some minor characters, the younger generation, that turned into these more important characters, because you actually got to see them not as children anymore. You got to see them as adults and moving on with the clan and the next generation. And that was beautifully done. And I can't help but thinking that, you know, I feel like George R.R. Martin could have taken a cue from Fonda Lee here. He really badly wanted to make a time jump to be able to wrap up A Song of Ice and Fire in 5 books. He was not able to do that. He failed at that job, and he ended up not doing a time jump and writing on through. And now he's at 7 books that he has to get through to tell his story. And I don't know if he's even going to get to 6 books, let alone 7 books. But this author showed how a time jump can be used to perfection, not just from book to book, but within a book. There were these moments where you'd be hearing this story and it feels a little odd. You're like, why is this character doing this? It feels out of place. And then all of a sudden you'll hear that character's age. And it's like, wow, this is a really cool thing that just happened. So yeah, it's so unique and so perfectly executed, and ultimately my favorite part about this book. The world building, I'm going to give another 4 out of 5 stars. The world is not incredible, but I did think there was some good dynamic between the various countries here. There was a bigger emphasis on the other countries and their involvement in the main storyline here. And it made the world feel bigger. It made it feel more real. But I still am not in love with this world. And when I look back on this book years from now, and I think that's the hallmark of a good world building, is when I remember it so richly with a lot of time passed. I'm not going to remember the specifics here. I'm going to ultimately remember a generic Asian-inspired city as the landscape. And that's it. I'm not going to be able to tell you city names other than Jong-Loon, the main city. I'm not going to tell you the differences between these different areas. It's all going to feel just kind of the same to me. And that's a problem when you want to give a good world building score to something. Now, this book did not set out to be this domineering world building achievement. It set out to be a character-driven, really well executed plot, and it succeeded at those. But yeah, I'm not going to give good high scores to the world building here, and nor am I going to give high scores to the next thing, and that is the fantasy elements. And again, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. And I'm going to give a 3 out of 5 to every book in this series because they all did the same thing. This wasn't truly a fantasy book. There was one fantasy element to these books, and that was the usage of Jade. When these characters wear Jade on their bodies, if you are predisposed to having this ability as a child, you can wear Jade and affix it to your body with jewelry, earrings, the like, and it will give you super martial arts powers. You're faster, you're stronger, you can deflect bullets, you are very super powered. But that's it. There's nothing else fantasy oriented in this entire book. And that's the story it wanted to tell, but I keep thinking that this book could have taken out those Jade elements and the same high scores would be here. This could have just been a regular old novel that did not have the fantasy tag, and it wouldn't have changed much. And I don't know if Fonda Lee just wants to be a fantasy writer and wanted to make sure a book got in the fantasy realm for her success, but it didn't feel like it needed to be there. And so, yeah, I was a little disappointed in that. I like higher fantasy elements in my books, but it didn't stand in the way because, this felt like a nice Godfather-inspired book. And I love The Godfather. Godfather is not fantasy at all. And so, yeah, just a 3 out of 5. Now, let us talk about the characters. The characters are incredible. It's a 6 out of 5 if I could give them. I am in love with these characters. I will remember every single one of these characters for many years to come. And I don't know that I'll ever forget them because they've seared themselves into my brain, much like the Godfather's characters have. I have not seen those movies in probably a decade, and I could tell you every single characteristic about the main characters of those books and movies, and I'll be able to do the same here. I love them. I grew with them. I went through pain and trauma with them. I went through success with them. And they're so well executed. They have such major differences between these characters that made them feel alive and real, and I cherish them for that. And I'm going to go back to that thing that I mentioned earlier that I really loved about this book, the time jumps. Because this book really focused on 3 main characters. And I don't want to say who those 3 are because I think that newcomers to this book that want to read Jade City for the first time, it might spoil something if I tell you who the 3 are. But rest assured there's 3 major ones. Now in this book there's more than 3 because with the 30-year time jump, you had I don't know if it's 30 years, but multiple decades. You had the children. There's 3 main children in this book, 2 boys and a girl. And they became prominent figures in this series because now you're seeing them lead and they're in charge and they have these major events happen to them. And you get to see things from their point of view also. And it was very amazing watching these kids. And oftentimes I don't get this huge attachment to children in fantasy books or books in general because they don't have these strong personalities, especially like little infants. They're cute, you care for them, but you don't have an attachment to them. And it was really fun to watch that growth happen here. It didn't happen instantly. You got to see multiple stages of their lives, and it worked so well. And I wish more books would try to execute like Fonda Lee executed here. The writing quality is another 5 out of 5. I thought the writing quality improved as the series goes along. I'd have to look back, but I think I gave a 4 out of 5 to Jade City. It just didn't wow me. It wowed me here. Again, the time jump was beautiful and such a great writing masterpiece. I thought that the character development here, the way that Fonda Lee talked about these characters and grew them over time was wonderful. I thought that the way that she put together her sentences was very beautiful by the time the series ended. And I really think like she grew as an author as we went along, and it makes me very excited to read literally everything she writes from here until eternity. And I'm very excited to read her next book, which I believe comes out in 2023. And I'm very excited to read that as soon as I can get my hands on it. Ultimately, as you could guess, my enjoyment from this book was a very easy 5 out of 5. I love it. I highly recommend the series to everybody. I will say though that I keep referencing The Godfather, and I think most people that look at this series would say the same thing, is that it's a very easy tie-in. If you watched The Godfather and you liked it or loved it, you're gonna love this series. If you watched The Godfather and you said, yeah, that's not for me, I don't think this series is gonna be for you either. Now, it's hard for me to look at it from that perspective because I loved The Godfather, and so this book was a very easy transition for me to fall in love again with this fun, real mafia family. But yeah, that's ultimately what I'd say. If you have no opinion on The Godfather, if you've never seen it, well, go watch it, first of all. But if you're not going to, then I still think you should give this book a shot. It's wonderful for all the ways that make wonderful fantasy books, and it deserves your time and attention. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this content, please consider giving a subscription below and checking out the Discord. So thank you so much, and as always, happy reading to you.